Step into the inner circle. I'm Melodie Alfiné, and here we read between the lines. About 3 years ago, I read The Wishing Game by Meg Shaffer, and I love this book. So when I first picked it up, I thought I was going to get a whimsical story about riddles and puzzles, and yeah, that's in there. It's also about a famous children's author named Jack Masterson, and he invites four people to Clock Island to compete in a series of games for a prize that could change their entire life. It's imaginative, nostalgic, and it feels like you're stepping into the pages of a book that you read and loved as a kid. But quite honestly, that's not the part that stayed with me. What did was the psychology underneath the concept, the characters. And this isn't a story about winning. What it is a story about is wishing. And Lucy Hart is a teacher's aide who wants to adopt a little boy named Christopher. And Christopher has experienced so much more loss than any child ever should. She loves him deeply, but she doesn't have the financial resources or the housing required to adopt him. So when this opportunity comes to compete on Clock Island, she sees this as something more than a game. She sees this as a possibility of becoming Christopher's mother, Christopher's family. And that changed the way that I read every single chapter because every puzzle carried emotional weight. And not because I was wondering whether or not she would solve the next riddle. Really, what I was wondering was would this be an opportunity that would provide a safe place that this little boy could call home? And I appreciated that the book never suggests that love is enough. Love matters, but also children, they need stability, consistency. They need safety. They need adults who can keep showing up for them. Lucy, she understands that, and she's willing to do the work to become that person for Christopher. And that made her feel so real. With Christopher, such a deep character. He's grieving, but he's still a child. He doesn't need someone to rescue him. Ultimately, he needs someone who will stay with him. And there is the difference. And also, that made me think about how often we confuse dramatic gestures with love. And when we think about children, love is usually much quieter. It's the adults who keep coming back. It's the adult who follows through. It's the adult that makes home feel predictable. And that is what Christopher is really looking for. Lucy, she carries wounds from her own childhood. Growing up, Jack Masterson's Clock Island books became a refuge for her. And what they did, it gave her somewhere to go when real life felt so lonely. And then I kept thinking about how so many of us have books like that. A story that we return to because it reminds us of who we were before life became so complicated. Sometimes books, they entertain us, and sometimes they become part of us. And Jack understood that. See, he wasn't just writing children's stories. What he was doing was creating a space where the lonely children could believe that another life was possible. And Lucy just didn't read those books, she survived with them. And as adults, we often talk about children's books like they were something we need to leave behind. And when I really lean into that, I don't think that that's actually true. I think that the stories that we read as children quietly shape the adults that we then become. What they do is they influence what we had hoped for, the people that we trust, and the lives that we try to build. And that's why Lucy's dream of adopting Christopher is so meaningful. See, what she's doing is trying to recreate her own childhood. She is trying to become a safe adult that she once needed. And I think a lot of us do that. We try to give someone else what we never received for ourselves. And sometimes when we think about it, it might be through parenting. Sometimes it might be through teaching. It might be through a friendship. Or maybe it's even through choosing to show up differently than someone who showed up for us. And that was the emotional center of this book. But then there's Jack Masterson. Everyone arrives believing that the competition is about solving riddles, and it's not. The game, it's revealing character. Every challenge exposes what the contestants value. Also, it exposes what they fear, what they've never stopped wishing for. Those puzzles, they're clever, but the people are what make them interesting. So, by the end of this book, I wasn't thinking about who solved the most riddles. What I was thinking about was belonging, about family, about how one safe adult can completely change the direction in a child's life. Also about how hope, it isn't something that we outgrow. We just learn to protect it differently. I also loved that it never felt cynical, not through the entire book. We have grief, we have loss, we have disappointment, but it still leaves the room for hope. And not that hope that pretends everything's going to work out perfectly. It actually is the type of hope that surprises you, that keeps you believing that healing is possible, that people can continue to show up for one another, that a story can still change someone else's life. And I think that's probably why this book resonated with me so much. It reminds me that the things that we once wished for as children don't always disappear. And sometimes they simply grow up with us. And if we're lucky, we become the answer to someone else's wish. So I close this book feeling hopeful. And not because every problem was solved, it wasn't, but because it reminded me that belonging, it's not something that we stumble into. Belonging is something that we build one choice at a time. And I loved the wishing game. And it's one that I think I'm going to be talking about for a long time. So, Inner Circle, what did the story reveal to you? And if you enjoyed this book reviews that go beyond the plot, subscribe, follow, and turn on those notifications because you don't want to miss the next time that we step into the Inner Circle.